The resume sat on my desk under the morning light, and I recognized the penmanship before I saw the name. Michael had always pressed too hard with pens, leaving faint impressions on the pages beneath. I lifted the paper and held it at an angle. There, in the fiber, were the ghost marks of his signature. My son had applied to work for me, and he had no idea who owned the company. I set the resume down and looked out the window of my office. The parking lot was filling with trucks. Thursday morning, 7:15. The crews were arriving for dispatch. I could hear Rodriguez laughing at something in the hallway, and the smell of fresh coffee drifted in from the break room. It was a good business, small but clean, built from nothing over 6 years with my hands and whatever credit I could scrape together after the severance ran out. Michael's resume was thin. One failed startup, a 6-month gap, then 2 short stints at companies I knew had downsized. At the bottom, under skills, he had listed strategic vision and disruptive thinking. I rubbed my thumb across the words and felt nothing. The last time I had seen my son in person was 4 years ago at a coffee shop near his apartment. He had been wearing a gray wool coat that probably cost more than my truck payment, and he ordered something with 4 modifiers that the barista wrote on the cup in marker. I drank black coffee from a paper cup. He talked about his startup for 30 minutes without asking how I was doing. When I mentioned I was looking into starting my own company, he smiled the way people smile at children who say they want to be astronauts. Then he left to take a call. I finished my coffee alone and drove home. But I am getting ahead of myself. It started 7 years ago on a Tuesday in March. I was 51 years old and had worked for Kellerman Industrial Supply for 23 years. I started on the warehouse floor, moved into dispatch, then operations management. I knew every vendor, every route, every seasonal swing in demand. I showed up early and left late. I trained people who later made more than I did. I never complained. That Tuesday, Bill Kellerman called me into his office at 4 in the afternoon. His son was there, the one with the business degree from somewhere expensive. Bill did not look at me when he said the company was restructuring. He said the word restructuring the way you say cancer in a waiting room. Quiet, final. They were bringing in new software, new systems, younger management. He said I would get 8 weeks of severance and that I had been a loyal employee. I nodded. I did not argue. I cleaned out my desk in 11 minutes. I had a photo of my late wife, a coffee mug, and a small cactus someone gave me one Christmas. I carried them to my truck in a cardboard box and set them on the passenger seat. The sun was still out. Traffic was light. When I got home, I called Michael. He lived 2 states away by then, in a city with a technology scene. He had graduated with a degree in business and marketing and spent a few years working for different companies before announcing he was going to start his own. I was proud of him. I told him so, even when I did not fully understand what his company did. Something about connecting brands with consumers through data analytics. He used a lot of words that sounded important. The phone rang 4 times before he picked up. "Hey, Dad." Kind of in the middle of something. "What's up?" I told him I had been let go. I kept my voice level. I said I was figuring out next steps and wanted to let him know in case he heard from his aunt or someone else in the family first. There was a pause on the other end. I heard voices in the background, someone laughing. "Wait, they actually fired you?" Michael said. "They called it restructuring." "Jesus, Dad." He exhaled into the phone. "I mean, you have to see this coming, right? You worked in logistics. That whole industry is getting automated. You can't just do things the old way and expect companies to keep you around." I sat down at the kitchen table. The wood was cool under my palms. "I did my job well," I said. "I'm sure you did. But that doesn't matter anymore. Everything is about efficiency now, optimization. You have to adapt or you get left behind." He paused, and I heard him say something to someone else, his hand probably over the phone. Then he came back. Look, I'm sorry. I know this sucks. But maybe it's a wake-up call, you know? Time to think about retirement or something. I was 51. I am not ready to retire, I said. Okay. Well, good luck with the job search. It's brutal out there for guys your age, but maybe you can find something part-time. He said it like he was being encouraging. Then I heard it. A soft sound in the back of his throat, barely there. A suppressed laugh. Is something funny? I asked. No, sorry. Someone just sent me something. Look, I have to jump. We will talk soon, okay? He hung up before I could respond. I sat at that table for a long time. The house was quiet. My wife had died 5 years before, and I had not changed much since then. Her garden was overgrown. The walls still had the paint she chose. I cooked the same meals and slept on the same side of the bed. The silence did not bother me most days, but that evening it pressed in from all sides. I thought about the laugh. It was small, easy to miss if you were not listening for it. But I was his father. I knew the difference between a distracted chuckle and the kind of sound someone makes when they think something is absurd. He had laughed because he thought my situation was ridiculous, predictable, the natural end of a man who did not keep up. I did not call him back. I did not call anyone. Instead, I went into the garage and found a legal pad. I started writing down everything I knew: suppliers, contacts, clients who had always dealt with me directly rather than going through corporate. I knew the inefficiencies at Kellerman. I knew where the margins were. I knew what the small contractors needed and how the big companies ignored them. I wrote for 2 hours, and by the time I stopped, I had the skeleton of a plan. It took me 4 months to set up the business. I used most of my severance and took out a loan against the house. I registered an LLC, leased a small warehouse space, and bought a used truck. I called it Whitman Supply Co., my last name on a sign. Simple. The first year was hard. I worked 16-hour days. I drove deliveries myself and answered the phone at midnight when a contractor had an emergency. I learned how to use accounting software and manage inventory databases. I made mistakes and fixed them. I lost clients and found new ones. I did not take a salary for 14 months. Michael called twice during that first year, once on my birthday and once on Christmas. Both times he talked about his startup and how close they were to a breakthrough. He did not ask how I was doing, and I did not tell him. When he mentioned visiting sometime, I said I would like that, but we both knew it would not happen. By the end of year 2, I had 6 employees and steady contracts with a dozen builders. By year 3, I moved into a larger space and hired a part-time bookkeeper. By year 4, I had 2 trucks and started getting requests from suppliers who used to ignore me. I kept my head down and my costs low. I paid people fairly and delivered on time. Word spread. Michael's startup folded in year 5. I found out from his aunt, who saw something on social media. She said he was looking for new opportunities and that it was a tough market. I nodded and said I was sure he would land on his feet. I did not reach out. He did not call. A year passed. Then another. I heard through the family that Michael had taken a job at a consulting firm, then left after a few months. Then another job, then another gap. His aunt stopped mentioning him as much, and when she did, her tone had changed. There was worry in it. And then, on a Thursday morning in September, his resume arrived. I read it 3 times. The cover letter was generic, the kind generated from a template. He had found the job posting online. We were looking for an operations coordinator, someone to manage logistics between suppliers and clients, handle scheduling, and troubleshoot problems. It was the kind of role I had done for 2 decades. The kind of role he once implied was obsolete. I called Rodriguez into my office. He had been with me since year 2, a solid man with a steady hand and good instincts. He looked at the resume and raised an eyebrow. "You know this guy?" he asked. "I do." "He any good?" "I do not know yet." Rodriguez waited. He knew when I was working something out. "Set up an interview," I said. "Standard process. Do not mention my name. You handle the first round." Rodriguez nodded and left. The interview was scheduled for the following Tuesday. I was not planning to sit in on it, but I wanted to watch. I had a small office adjacent to the conference room with a window that faced in. The blinds were usually drawn, but I could angle them to see without being seen. Michael arrived 8 minutes late. He was wearing a suit that looked expensive, but slightly rumpled, like he had worn it too many times without dry cleaning. His hair was shorter than I remembered, and there were lines around his eyes that had not been there before. He shook Rodriguez's hand and sat down with his back to my window. I watched as Rodriguez walked him through the role. Michael nodded along, and I could see him trying to match the energy, trying to seem engaged. But there was something tired in the way he held himself. His shoulders were tight. He laughed at something Rodriguez said, but it sounded forced. Rodriguez asked him about his experience. Michael talked about his startup, framing the failure as a learning experience. He mentioned his strategic vision and his ability to pivot under pressure. Rodriguez asked a direct question about managing supply chain logistics, and Michael hesitated. He gave an answer that sounded good, but lacked specifics. Rodriguez made a note. The interview lasted 30 minutes. When it was over, Rodriguez walked Michael out. I stayed at the window and watched my son leave through the parking lot. He got into a car that was newer than mine but had a dent in the rear bumper. He sat in the driver's seat for a full minute before starting the engine. Rodriguez came back to my office. "He is not a fit," Rodriguez said. "Why?" "Too much talk. Not enough substance. He has ideas but no follow-through. He would be a project." I nodded slowly. "Hire him," I said. Rodriguez blinked. "You sure?" "Hire him. Probationary period. Standard pay. He reports to you." Rodriguez studied me for a moment, then nodded. He did not ask why. That was one of the things I appreciated about him. Michael started 2 weeks later. I made sure I was out of the office that first day. Rodriguez handled orientation and showed him the systems. I reviewed the security footage that evening. Michael looked smaller in the warehouse than I expected. He wore khakis and a polo shirt and carried a notebook. He took notes while Rodriguez explained the routing software. For the first month, I kept my distance. I came in early and stayed late, but I adjusted my schedule so I was rarely in the warehouse when Michael was there. I reviewed his work through Rodriguez. The reports were adequate. Michael was punctual and polite. He asked questions and followed instructions. He did not complain. In the second month, I started testing him. I had Rodriguez assign him a problem client, a contractor who changed orders at the last minute and blamed us for delays. Michael handled it poorly at first. He tried to smooth things over with explanations instead of solutions. The client called to complain. I listened to the voicemail and said nothing. Rodriguez pulled Michael aside and walked him through a better approach. Michael listened. The next time the client called, Michael had a solution ready before the complaint finished. The client did not call back. I watched this pattern repeat. Michael made mistakes, received correction, and adjusted. He was learning the way I had learned through repetition and failure. There was no shortcut, no strategic vision that bypassed the work, just the work itself. In the third month, we crossed paths. It was a Friday afternoon. I had been meeting with a supplier in the conference room, and I left through the side door that led into the warehouse. Michael was at the dispatch desk, reviewing a manifest. He looked up as I walked past. Our eyes met for less than 2 seconds. I saw the moment of recognition start to form, then falter. He knew me, but the context was wrong. His brain could not reconcile my face with this place. I nodded once, a polite acknowledgement between strangers, and kept walking. I heard him say something to the person next to him, but I was already out the door. That evening, Rodriguez came to my office. He asked about you, Rodriguez said. What did you tell him? That you are the owner, that you keep a low profile. I nodded. Did he say anything else? He looked like he had seen a ghost. I leaned back in my chair and looked at the ceiling. The tiles had a water stain in the corner I kept meaning to fix. How is he doing? I asked. Better. He is not great yet, but he is learning. He listens now. Good. Rodriguez waited, and I knew he wanted to ask the real question. Why was I doing this? What was the point? But he did not ask, and I did not explain. The truth was, I did not know yet. I had not planned past this moment. I had hired my son because I could, and because some part of me wanted him to understand what I did. Not through explanation, but through experience. But I had not decided what came next. Michael did not approach me. Over the following weeks, I saw him glance my way a few times when I was in the warehouse, but he never came over. I wondered if he was afraid or embarrassed, or if he simply did not know what to say. I did not make it easier for him. In the 4th month, we had a crisis. A shipment was delayed due to a vendor error, and 3 contractors were threatening to pull their accounts. It was the kind of problem that could spiral if not handled immediately. Rodriguez was out sick, and I had a meeting I could not miss. I called Michael into my office. He stood in the doorway, and for the first time, we were in the same room with nothing between us. I need you to handle the vendor issue, I said. The files are on the server. You have 2 hours. He nodded, but he did not move. Is there a problem? I asked. No, He stopped. Why did you hire me? I looked at him. He was thinner than I remembered. His hands were at his sides, and he was not trying to seem confident or strategic. He just looked tired. Because you applied, I said, and because Rodriguez thought you could learn. Did you know it was me when you saw the resume? Yes. He absorbed that. His jaw tightened. Are you going to fire me? Not if you fix the vendor problem in the next 2 hours. He stared at me, and I stared back. Then he nodded once and left. He fixed it. I do not know how, but when I returned from my meeting, Rodriguez called to say the contractors were satisfied, and the vendor had expedited a replacement shipment at no extra cost. I reviewed Michael's notes. He had been direct, professional, and focused on solutions. It was good work. That evening, I stayed late. The building was empty except for the night security light in the warehouse. I heard footsteps in the hallway and looked up. Michael was standing in the doorway of my office. Can I come in? He asked. Yes. He sat in the chair across from my desk, the same chair where suppliers and clients sat during negotiations. He looked around the office, taking in the framed photos on the wall, the awards from the Contractors Association, the coffee mug with my name on it. I did not know you built this, he said. You did not ask. He flinched. It was subtle, but I saw it. I was an asshole, he said. I did not disagree. When you called to tell me you lost your job, I laughed. I do not know if you heard it, but I did. I thought you were out of touch. I thought you did not understand how the world worked. He looked down at his hands. I was wrong. Yes, I said. My company failed because I thought I was smarter than everyone else. I thought I could skip the boring parts and just do the big strategy stuff. But I did not know how anything actually worked. I hired people to do the real work, and when they left, I could not do it myself. So everything fell apart. I waited. I have had 6 jobs in 3 years. I got fired from 2 of them, and I quit the others before they could fire me. I could not figure out why I kept failing. He looked up at me. But I know now. I did not respect the work. I did not respect the people who did it. The office was quiet, except for the hum of the refrigerator in the break room down the hall. And now? I asked. Now I am trying to learn. I know I am not good yet, but I show up. I listen. I do what Rodriguez tells me. He paused. I want to be good at this. I leaned forward and rested my arms on the desk. Why? I asked. Because it matters. Because you built something real, and I want to understand how. He swallowed. And because I owe you an apology that is more than just words. I looked at my son. He was 32 years old, and for the first time in a decade, I recognized him. Apology accepted, I said. Now go home. You have an early shift tomorrow. He nodded and stood. At the door, he stopped. Thank you, he said. For what? For hiring me. For not telling me. For letting me figure it out. You are welcome. He left, and I sat in the quiet office for a long time. Over the next year, Michael became a solid employee. He was never going to be brilliant, but he was reliable. He learned the systems, built relationships with clients, and handled problems without needing constant supervision. Rodriguez promoted him to lead coordinator after 9 months. Michael did not ask for it, and he did not celebrate when he got it. He just kept working. We did not become close. We were not the kind of father and son who had lunch together or talked about feelings. But we were colleagues, and there was respect in that. When he had questions, he asked. When I had advice, I gave it. We built something small and functional between us, the way you build anything worthwhile, one day at a time, with attention and patience. On the anniversary of his hiring, I called him into my office. I had prepared an envelope with a raise and a letter outlining his performance. He read it carefully, then looked up. This is more than I expected, he said. You earned it. He nodded, and I thought that would be the end of it. But he stayed in the chair. Can I ask you something? He said. Go ahead. When you hired me, did you plan all of this? Did you know it would go this way? I thought about that. No, I said. I did not have a plan. Then why did you do it? I looked out the window at the parking lot. The afternoon sun was slanting across the asphalt, and I could see the drivers loading the trucks for the next day's routes. Because you are my son, I said, and because I wanted to see if you could do the work. And? You can. He smiled, just a little. It was not the smile of someone who thought they were smarter than everyone else. It was the smile of someone who had learned something difficult and survived. Thanks, Dad, he said. It was the first time he had called me that in years. He left, and I turned back to my desk. There was paperwork to finish, calls to return, problems to solve. The same work I had been doing for 7 years, the same work I would do tomorrow. It was not glamorous, it was not disruptive. But it was mine. And it was real. And that was enough. I thought about the man I was 7 years ago, sitting at a kitchen table after being let go, writing plans on a legal pad in an empty house. I thought about the son who laughed because he thought I was obsolete. And I thought about the man he was now, loading trucks and solving problems and showing up every day to do work he once thought was beneath him. There was no grand revelation, no moment of triumph, just the quiet knowledge that I had built something that lasted, and that my son had finally learned the value of doing the same. I finished the paperwork, locked the office, and drove home. The house was still quiet, the garden was still overgrown, but the silence did not press in the way it used to. It was just silence, and I had learned to live with it. The next morning, I woke early and drove to the warehouse. Michael's truck was already in the lot. Through the window, I could see him at the dispatch desk, reviewing the day's routes. He looked up as I walked in, nodded once, and went back to work. I poured a cup of coffee and stood in the doorway, watching my crew prepare for the day. Rodriguez was joking with one of the drivers. The phone was ringing. Someone was arguing about an invoice. It was ordinary and imperfect, and exactly what it needed to be. I had built this, not for revenge, and not for vindication. I built it because I could, and because I knew how, and because the work itself was worth doing. And my son, who once mocked me for being left behind, was now part of it. He had learned what I already knew, that there are no shortcuts, no strategies that replace the work, no visions that matter without execution. There is only showing up, paying attention, and doing the next right thing. That is what I taught him, not through lectures or confrontations, but through the simple act of letting him work beside me until he understood. It was enough. I drank my coffee and went to my office. There were contracts to review, suppliers to call, problems to solve. The same work as yesterday, the same work as tomorrow. And somewhere in the warehouse, my son was doing the same. We did not need to talk about it. The work said everything that needed saying.